Welcome to Thursday UK. This is the Bases Loaded vlog, or vlog, whichever one you want to use. We're doing our MLB Preview show. We're splitting it down division by division and also uploading this as an audio podcast on the stream and then uploading it as separate videos on the US Sports Media YouTube channel up on YouTube. Just search US Sports Media in the YouTube search and you can find us there. Subscribe for baseball videos every single day of the season with me, Oliver Connolly. I'm joined by Stephen Edwards for our first preview of the season, and we're going to go with the AL East. Stephen, how are you?
No, I'm really well. Baseball is upon us. I know it started last week in Sydney down in Australia, but this is where the fun really begins. Every team starts even, and 162 games later we'll find out who is in the playoffs. And this is the one day of the year when the baseball season gets started that everyone is at an even kill and nobody's thinking the worst at this particular point of view. Everyone is optimistic. That will soon change. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, absolutely. Let's get straight into the AL East then. We're going to start with the New York Yankees, the biggest name in baseball. It's been a massive change in culture and personality, in my opinion, from last year to this year now with the off-season.
Yeah, there has been changes, obviously, almost like with Mariano going, it was almost like one of the other players coming to the end of an era. Obviously, heading into this season, we've got another one that's going to ride off into the sunset. So it's kind of sad in a way, because I can remember the days when these guys came through back in the mid-90s, and it really will be one tearjerker after another for a Yankees fan this season.
All right, let's check their off-season review. If you're listening to the audio podcast of this, the first AL preview, go up to the YouTube channel. We got some cool graphics. There's going to be videos of players and pictures and all that stuff. Some funny stuff up there as well, so make sure you go and check it up there. Stephen, they lose Robinson Cano, Curtis Granderson, Phil Hughes, Boone Logan, Joba Chamberlain. The key one, got to be Robinson Cano.
Yeah, that is the big key loss for them. I mean, there was all kinds of rumours flying around last season as to would he stay, whether he might go elsewhere, would the Yankees stump up some money, and there was all kind of ridiculous amounts of money being rumoured to be wanted by Cano and what the Yankees may end up offering. And in the end, I think it was kind of like a foregone conclusion that Cano would eventually leave the Yankees.
Yeah, I agree with you, and we both agreed that it's probably the right decision long-term for this Yankees franchise to turn around to not stump up that 10-year deal.
Yeah, I think it is. But, I mean, it didn't stop them spending money elsewhere. They took that money which they were going to throw at Cano and thought, well, hang on a second, we've got money to burn, we'll throw it elsewhere. When we heard previously they were going to consider to cut their payroll.
They were cutting the payroll to save the tax and just said, let's just spend the $500 million this offseason. So they also lost, as we said, Mariano Rivera. It's a farewell to Mariano, the last 42 in the league. But they also lose the Mariano Rivera farewell tour, which at times I think could have been a minor distraction. I'm not saying it's a big distraction. I love Mariano like everyone else as much as a Red Sox fan can. Just saying it was there. Stephen, they also lose the Alex Rodriguez PED scandal for a year. It's out of there.
Yeah, I think they'll be quite glad to kind of put that on the back burner for a year, because if anything distracted the team last season, it had to be that. I think the Mariano Rivera thing was a kind of nice thing to get involved in, and I can understand maybe the thought process around would it have distracted them somewhat, but if that didn't, then certainly the A-Rod saga did.
All right, let's look at what they brought in, and they completely revamped their lineup. But like I said to multiple people on the podcast when they were asking me over this offseason, they spent $500 million, and their infield got worse, and they signed guys with a lot of question marks. So they re-signed manager Joe Girardi, first of all. I think that's a really good deal. Had to be done. You said at the time he's the more important one than Robinson Cano. They bring in Carlos Beltran, Jacoby Ellsbury, but what comes with Jacoby Ellsbury, Stephen, is the Jacoby Ellsbury hope. I've told many people about this before. You get the Jacoby Ellsbury hope. He's going to lead off for us. He's going to steal bases. He's going to be a dominant dynamite player, but he's always injured, so watch out for that one. Kelly Johnson comes in as a utility guy. Brian McCann as well, one of the best power-hitting catchers in the league. Masahiro Tanaka is probably the biggest addition for the Yankees this season.
Yeah, I mean, he is the biggest addition for them. I mean, he's coming in with a lot of hoopla because of what he did in Japan, but it'll be to see how he translates to it. We talked about it ad nauseum about how some Japanese players adjust to the US game, how some players don't. So it'll be very interesting to see what Tanaka does. I think if you look at their lineup on paper, I mean, you sit and think, there's some big names in there, some guys who have been incredibly successful at times, but there is so many question marks, as you rightly say. There's Ellsbury and what his injury status might be as the season goes along. Brian McCann, the guy who lost the job in Atlanta and then won it back because Gettis got injured. So again, I'm not entirely sure about how reliable he could be for them. And then some of the other guys, I mean, like Mark Teixeira, not exactly the greatest first baseman in the world right now. Carlos Beltran is a very reliable name, but again, he picks up his game in postseason. So they've got to get to the postseason first before Carlos Beltran has another chance to put up some of those numbers. And of course, Alfonso Soriano has come over as well. So there is some big bats in that lineup, but I just can see if everything meshes well, absolutely fine. But if not, then I can see where there will be some shakiness there. And even in the pitching, I mean, what big shoes that David Robertson's got to fill, being the closer for that team. I mean, that's going to be incredibly difficult. If he gets off to a slow start, that could be a big problem for him. I think he needs to get off and perhaps string some saves together in the early going.
So it's going to be a big adjustment for Tanaka coming in. He's slated now to be the fourth starter behind Sabathia, Kuroda, Nova, and Pineda will be the fifth starter for the Yankees. Joe Girardi confirmed this the other day. But with Masahiro Tanaka comes the Masahiro Tanaka lifestyle. This is a man who flew a chartered jet to his press conference, brought the poodle, brought the wife in the fur coat. They've been described to Buster Olney as the David Beckham and Victoria Beckham when they first dropped in LA. They've got a TV camera following them around for the first 6 months in New York for a new Japanese TV show. Stephen, the lifestyle also descends with this dynamite splitter pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, he is like a walking superstar, isn't he? It's going to come to. I suppose in a way, the Yankees is the right team for him.
Yeah.
The kind of players they've had down the years. But again, you begin to wonder about maybe that being a distraction for the Yankees. You've got guys who just get on and do their job. I mean, if you look back, we'll talk about the Red Sox in a little while, but I mean, you get Red Sox last season. Yeah, there were superstars in that team, but nobody I didn't think thought they was any better than anyone else. And then you've got this guy coming in who comes in as a superstar, and you begin to wonder about how that'll mesh into the clubhouse and some of those egos that some of the other guys have got, and maybe a few noses might get put out of joint if things don't start going too well.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. Perfect situation, though, because they love the hype machine. It's like the Cowboys of the Major Leagues. They also acquire the Derek Jeter Farewell Tour. That, for me, probably won't be as much as an issue because I just think that Jeter's the captain and what you're going to do, speak out against a farewell tour with Derek Jeter. But they have, despite losing the Alex Rodriguez PED scandal, they have acquired the A-Rod lawsuit scandal.
Yeah, so A-Rod will still be a part of the headlines. I think it'll be not as much of a distraction this season. Mm-hmm. I think the guys have now come to the conclusion, obviously, they're going to have to move on without A-Rod because there was obviously a lot of thoughts last year about when A-Rod might come back and, when's he going to play, when's he not going to play. And you've always got that in the back of your minds. But I think they come into this season with, a fair idea of everything that's going to go on and there's going to be no shocks. They kind of put it to one side. And Girardi's got to just concern himself with the guys who are on the field and try and get them to produce the very, very best. But, I mean, Kelly Johnson's a hell of a drop-off from A-Rod.
All right, let's get to the Yankees' key to the season. My key to the Yankees for this season is the performance of Tanaka. Like, if he hits the ground running, and I'm not saying he's going to be Yu Darvish, I'm really unsure about him. I love the splitter. I love the fact that Brian McCann says he can move the ball 9 different ways. That boggles the mind, and he's looked really good in spring. You just don't know with these guys, as we've inferred before, and we said many times, we just don't know. But the key to me for them is if he hits the ground running, they can possibly be competitive for a wildcard spot.
Yeah, I think he's going to have to be the big key for them. I mean, the rest of the rotation at times can be shaky. And I think they're going to need a guy like Tanaka if he can come in there and prove that he could be, the two guy maybe behind Sabathia. But if he doesn't, then they're going to have big problems because you can see lots of holes in that Yankee pitching. I mean, for me, I think the key for them is can they get what they want out of this aging roster? Mm-hmm. Can they get these seasons out of a Carlos Beltran? Can Brian McCann have a really good season in Yankee Stadium? It's these kind of things. Can Jacob Ellsbury stay healthy? Mm-hmm. So for me, there's a whole lot of ifs and buts and what ifs about the Yankees. If the cards fall the right way, this Yankees team could be a playoff team. But I have a feeling that some of these cards aren't going to fall the way they want them to, and they're going to be looking at this season and thinking, so this was a what if, and it was just an experiment that went completely wrong.
I don't want to spend too long on the Yankees because we've got plenty of other teams to get to tonight, but they are a big story and there's plenty of talking points with them that we can cut time out with the other ones. How much does it worry you when you say that this is the slated starting lineup, Stephen? Okay, it's Ellsbury, Jeter, Beltran, Teixeira, Brian McCann, Alfonso Soriano, Brett Gardner, Kelly Johnson, and Brian Roberts. There's not one single guy under the age of 30.
This is it. It's an aging roster. I mean, you can take a look at all those guys. Take a look at those guys and think to yourself, you can make a case for them having good seasons. You can make a case that these guys have had seasons in the past. And this is what it is, the past. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. They're banking on these guys doing one last run of trying to do this. It's almost like they want Jeter to take this team on his magical run to the playoffs, and can they get, the World Series or whatever in these last particular season. But it's going to be very, very difficult for these guys. And these are the guys as well, I think the Yankees are going to have to manage their complete roster and give some of these guys some days off, because you start playing these guys day in, day out, and they're going to struggle at times. I mean, Beltran is certainly a guy that's had his issues in the past. I mean, obviously Ellsbury. And there's so many question marks about how many games you can get out of these guys. I think for me, it's almost like when you name the batting order and the first thing you put is a DH, and you're sort of saying, right, okay, who's going to be the DH, and all the arms shoot up.
Soriano's fighting everyone. Soriano's like, whoa, everyone. It ain't happening. I didn't come here to play right field at Yankee Stadium. No, thank you. Stephen, let's finish with predictions for the Yankees then. I've got them finishing 4th in the division. Where do you have them?
I think they're going to finish 4th as well. I think the only team that's going to finish below them is the Blue Jays.
I agree with that. Right, let's get to a team that I really am being fascinated by this year, this offseason even, and it's the Baltimore Orioles. Really tried to make some strides. Expectations, that's what they've really acquired now with expectations. They bring in Nelson Cruz, Ubaldo Jimenez. They trade for Steve Lombardozzi the other day, Yoan Santana, and still they're open to discussions with Kendrys Morales. And word on the street is, Stephen, that a deal has been agreed and they're waiting till the amateur draft passes so they don't have to give yet another draft pick because they just blew away all their draft picks. Where's this team at for you?
See, I thought last season this would be the team that could cause problems in this division. I thought they had enough pieces in place that they could make great strides and really start challenging. But again, they're in the AL East, and that's what the problem is. I mean, we sat here last season and said, well, you can make a case for all of these teams being in any spot within this division. It was the way it was. It was a very even division, and teams could be very, very good, but they could also be very, very poor. And the Orioles at times showed glimpses of what they could do, but didn't really show it consistent enough. But I think when you've got a team that fields the ball as well as they do, they're always going to be in with a chance. And I think they may very well be the best fielding team in the American League. So it's always going to have them in games, and they're going to be very, very tough to beat. They're not going to beat themselves. The problem I have with the Orioles is that you've got a guy like a Chris Davis who had a phenomenal season last year, and then you're going to have to try and expect him to repeat that performance again. Nelson Cruz is going to help them. I mean, he was a guy that hit incredibly well with the Rangers last season before he was banned for the last 50 games. So you can only benefit from adding his bat to the lineup. What's he going to hit? I mean, you could say 40 home runs last season. I think if he hit 25 for the Orioles, I think that would be great for them. 25 home runs, 85, 90 RBIs. I think that would be a great platform to help this Orioles team get to the postseason. I like this team. They're an exciting team to watch, and I think they're going to be one of those teams that on any given night could beat anyone.
I agree with that. I really like the 3-4-5 punch of Chris Davis, Adam Jones, and Nelson Cruz. That's some power, and we spoke about protection the other day, protected all the way through the order there for Chris Davis and Adam Jones. I like that. My fear for them comes with that rotation. I like Chris Tillman, I like Ubaldo Jimenez, but he's facing AL East lineups in AL East ballparks, and I like Wai Chen, but I think there's a big drop-off when you get to Bud Norris and Miguel Gonzalez, who are slated to be the 4th and 5th starters right now. Yeah,
I think we could very well see Dylan Bundy at some point. Mm-hmm. I think he's going to be a guy that could make a big splash. I mean, heard of Bundy over about the last year or so, and for me, I think he could be a guy that's going to come up. I like it, same as you. I love the about a Jimenez signing. I think he was a guy that did incredibly well when he was over in Colorado. Did well for Cleveland towards the end of last season. So that's a good pickup for Baltimore. And I think if he comes in there and does a good job, then it gives Baltimore a reasonably good 1-2 punch. And he's only going to love playing in front of that defense. That's going to be a good thing for any pitcher to go out there and have.
I agree with that. The only thing they really lost, I mean, Michael Morse is a loss, but Brian Roberts is the guy who jumped ship to go to the Yankees. But they make the move for Steve Lombardozzi. I like Ryan Flaherty as like a platoon sort of spot start guy. He can play basically all the infield positions and corner outfield. And of course, they got Manny Machado to come back as well. So I still think they're pretty set there. I don't think they've suffered any losses at all, just improved.
No, I think they have improved. I mean, this is a team as well that I think they hit the most home runs, I think, last season. So, I mean, this is a team that can really hurt you in that respect. So, I mean, you look at it this way. They hit home runs. They don't give up runs. And they're pitching, if they could get some really good outings out there. And I think the other thing is for their pitching as well is they've got to get a very good season out of Tommy Hunter. I think if he's going to be the guy that's going to be the closer for them, he's got to be solid. Because if he's not, again, that could prove to be their downfall. We're not entirely sure yet what Hunter can bring to the table in terms of closing out games. So, yeah, a few little question marks about their pitching, but they are certainly going in the right direction.
What's your key to their season to make it successful?
I think, for me, the Jimenez has got to be a reliable number 2 starter for them, which is one of the keys for me. And the other one is they've got to get outstanding production from the 3, 4, 5 spot in their order. So it does mean that Nelson Cruz does have to hit that 25, 30 home runs, and Chris Davis doesn't have much of a drop-off. Because I think he can potentially have to have a bit of a drop-off with the 50 home runs he hit last season. So, yeah, I think those, for me, they're the two big things. Jimenez has got to step up as number 2 star, and the middle of the order's got to be very, very good.
For me, I think they need to figure out that rotation. What are they going to do with that back end? Like you said, Bundy's a great shout when he comes back in there, but they really have to figure out, and I wouldn't... they've made moves. They've put themselves in the shot window as a win-now team. I wouldn't rule them out in any trades coming forward. So where do you have them ranked as finishing in this division?
I've got the Orioles finishing 3rd, just above the Yankees in the division.
That's exactly where I have them as well. I think they're just a tiny step behind both I don't want to spoil, but it's obviously the Rays and Boston. I won't say in which positions they come in, but they just that step behind, but definitely trending in the right direction.
Yeah, they're moving up. They're, dare I say, moving on up. They are a team that could very well finish around about 85 wins, even more than that, and find themselves in a very, very tough division. But I think Baltimore will be a playoff team this year.
All right, then let's get to the Tampa Bay Rays. This team is absolutely stacked and loaded to go.
See, do you know what I love about Tampa is the fact that they always are, they're well managed. They're very, very solid pitching wise. They've got a lineup with just guys that can produce. It's just very difficult to fathom with them how they always perform so well in the regular season, and then things just seem as they go wrong in the playoffs, and you can't understand it because they've got the pitching. So that's the first thing normally. You go into the playoffs if you've got the pitching that can get the job done. Yes, they've got the pitching. Have they got an ace? Yes, they've got an ace. They've got David Price. Have they got hitters that can do the job in key situations? Yeah, you've got, guys like Ivan Longoria and some of the other guys they've got around them as well. So why do they never produce in the postseason? That's probably the biggest question mark against this team. But yeah, you look at the team on paper. I mean, the Tampa Bay Rays are just a really, really fundamentally sound team.
Let's look at what they did in the offseason then. In terms of the loss column, I think Kelly Johnson as a utility infielder can be a loss for when you've got such a long stretch of games in that competitive division. Fernando Rooney, though, as a relief pitcher, probably the major loss.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the holes in the bullpen. So it's going to be a case of that they'll have to try and put those arms to good use. And I don't really worry too much about their pitching. I always think that whoever they put out there in some respects just does the job.
Yeah.
Because it's just the way their setup is. they seem to they always find the right arms to put in that bullpen.
I agree with that. So when they acquired stuff, they went into the trade market. They picked up Ryan Hannigan. They picked up Logan Forsythe. Plugged 2 holes, getting a younger catcher and replacing that utility infielder who can play on the corners as well. But the key thing they acquired, Stephen Edwards, they've got another year of David Price jerseys. He's sticking around for another year.
Yeah, David Price is sticking around for another year before he dons the pinstripes in New York. And that's just one of those things, it's the other thing that Tampa have had to face is they do sometimes have to trade away their guys or they walk away via free agency, which is a little bit disappointing. They also play in one of the worst ballparks in Major League Baseball as well, which is not a fun place to go and watch baseball. I've been there myself. It's not nice. But having Price around for another year, I think he's got to make a run and show the American League in this particular year that he is one of the top elite pitchers in this. And that could very well help vault this team into either a championship series or even a World Series.
Is this rotation the best in the American League? Look at this here. David Price, stud, prime of his career. Alex Cobb, Matt Moore, Chris Archer, and people have fallen over themselves to praise this kid, Jake Odorizzi. So, man, this is special.
This is a very special rotation. Jake Odorizzi was on my radar come fantasy baseball time, and very pleased to have picked him up because, he could be special. Chris Archer is believed to be on the verge as well of breaking out. And you've got a rotation there where basically Matt Moore's regarded as a third starter for that team. He won 17 games last year. This is... They haven't got the 1-2 punch like the Tigers have got with Scherzer and Verlander. But this is the deepest, most talented rotation in Major League Baseball.
I agree with that entirely. So looking at their keys to victory for me, you look at how good that rotation is at the start. They need that bullpen to be really solid, and they often get, like you said, plug in and play, solid bullpen play. But I look at Grant Balfour, and I think they bring him in 36 years of age. I just don't know if he's going to cut it and help them hold on to leads because they struggled with that last year. Something from watching AL East baseball last year is that they do often get out in front of the Rays. When teams start to come back on them, they struggle with momentum. Some people don't believe in it in baseball, but just watching the Rays last year, I think they're a team where they're very much like a pendulum. They go one way and they can blow teams out. They go the other way and they do struggle. So for me, it's about how well that bullpen can come together.
Yeah, I think it is how well the bullpen can come together and can they win those tight games. I think, as you like what you say, I mean, they're very, very talented and we both agree on that, but can they win those tight games? And sometimes the offense doesn't quite produce as many runs as you think it should do. And I think that's the other thing is that the offense has got to be consistent and they've got to be a hell of a lot more than just the middle of the order guys. They've got to get solid production up and down that lineup. And if they can do that and the starting pitching is as good as it looks, they're going to be incredibly dangerous in that division. But again, I mean, it's a very, very tough division. If they was playing in one of the other divisions, you could pretty much see a team maybe winning 95 games and just walking away with it.
Completely agree. I've got them slated then at 91 games. This is the predictions within the division. I got them in 91 games this season. That's one less than last year, just because I think the bottom of the division has risen somewhat where it could just snag a game. I've got them at second, and that isn't just through Red Sox love and Red Sox tinted glasses. I just think that it is a young team, and they do really need to get off to a hot start. I think they're all going to come really good. Don't get me wrong, we just talked about how talented that rotation is, but they're still going to take some time, especially Odorizzi, to get going. So they need to get off to a hot start, and I think Boston are primed to get off to a hotter start. So I've got them finishing second in the division.
See, I've got the Rays actually winning this division. I think they're young. They're hungry. They've got experience where they need it. And I think this is a team that could win this division. I don't think they're going to win it by much. I think you're going to come down to like the last week of the season. And even if they don't win a division, they're still going to make the playoffs. But I think they've just got enough to try and squeak through. I've got them winning the division by probably like a game.
Yeah. All right, let's run to Toronto before we do move to Boston. I want to get to this team. And looking at what they've acquired and lost, people can see this on the graphic. Stephen, they've lost millions and millions of dollars. They've acquired deep, dark depression because they've blown those millions of dollars. They didn't improve. They were primed to pick up one of the Santanas. They were primed to pick up Jimenez as well. They didn't get any three of them to improve that rotation that is severely, severely lacking. They're in trouble. The only guy they bring in is a catcher, Navarro. This isn't looking too great.
No, this isn't looking good for the Blue Jays. I mean, they're very much now sellers. I mean, they were buyers just over a year ago. With just whatever they could get their hands on, they were bringing in because they thought they were in prime position to make a run in the American League East, and they bought over guys, like R.A. Dickey and Jose Reyes and various other players, but it just really didn't work out for them last season. Everything that could go wrong to the Blue Jays went wrong. And I have a feeling at some point in the season they're going to lose Jose Bautista as well. I think he's going to be off. And they're going to have to really try and rebuild this team. And when you look at it, I mean, the lineup really doesn't strike that much fear into you. I mean, Encarnacion and Lind in the middle of that lineup, not too bad. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how Colby Rasmus does this season, but in general, that lineup is, for me, not that great. I mean, you look at it compared to some of the other lineups in the American League East, it doesn't stack up. No, it doesn't stack up across the board in some other parts of the American League either. And the pitching, the starting pitching, rough. I can see some absolute horror shows going out there on some nights. I mean, I think R.A. Dickey's run is over, and it's a bit of a shame because being a huge Mets fan, R.A. Dickey brought some very, very magical moments to Citi Field when he was there, but I think Dickey's just not doing that great in Toronto. I'd love to see him have a bounce back here. If not, then I'd love to see him back in the Mets. But the rest of the pitching for me is not that great, and I can see some teams just pounding this team.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Not only is the lineup not great, it's potentially the most fragile lineup in the entire big leagues. Like Rasmus, injured. Laurie has his own injury concerns. Reyes, already injured. It's not great. Batista, I think, is definitely right up there in the trade block. And this is where I put my key to their season, Stephen, simply do whatever you can to shed salary. Take the season apart, because even if everyone's healthy and can play to their potential, you're still probably at maximum, everyone fires on all cylinders, third in the division. Like, that's where you are. You'd be fighting with the Orioles. So you just do whatever you can, ring up all the contenders, say, do you fancy taking Jose Bautista's contract, fancy taking Jose Reyes' contract? Obviously, they're probably not going to take Rasmus's and Reyes' contract, but just do whatever you can to shed as much salary as possible.
Yeah, you've got to shed salary. They're a prime case, actually. You start getting rid of some of the experienced guys, and then once you get into the next arbitration year and start bringing up some of the other guys, I mean, a couple of their young arms in Stroman and Sanchez should be on the way later in the season, get a good look at them as well. But they've got to try and get rid of whatever players they can. So I think Batista will be one of the first out the door. I'd try and shift Reyes, but the problem with Reyes now is that the injury concerns are really building up. I mean, they overvalued him when they got hold of him, and that was on the back end of the fact that the Marlins gave him a ridiculous contract. Yeah. So they've inherited that as well,
and
it makes it pretty much very, very difficult to.
It's a 7-108 deal, I think.
Yeah, it's around that because the Mets wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, it's impossible
the Mets
to
would
deal.
like to have re-signed him.
It's impossible to deal because he's got the hamstring concerns. And one thing that someone who has hamstring concerns, I will tell you right now, not only does it just hurt, even when you're playing with them, if they've gone a couple of times in a row, which his consistently go, you're playing in agony all the time. One thing I will tell you as well, Stephen Edwards, and this isn't trying to cast aspersions on Jose Reyes or any other players like Jacoby Ellsbury struggling with hamstring injuries right now in the big leagues. If you have hamstring injuries after the age of 28, one, they don't get better, and two, it's usually the product of either a growth hormone or a boost in testosterone. So either way, he has got all sorts of red flags where a team just isn't going to touch him.
Yeah, no, teams aren't going to touch him. I mean, hamstring issues are nothing new. I mean, Mets fans know that, what he was like with his hamstrings before, and he would either be very, very good because he was healthy, or he would be just average. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't feel his position particularly great either. And if you take the speed away from Reyes, he really isn't that great of a player. And those hamstring injuries have just robbed him of that speed. So you've now got a contract you can't get rid of. and they're stuck with him. And so, for me, I think you've got to look elsewhere and try and deal Batista, get rid of him, see if you can maybe get rid of R.A. Dickey when we get a bit nearer towards the trade deadline, and then see what other arms you can maybe bring up from the farm.
All right, then, let's finish off with the Boston Red Sox. Let's move to Fenway Park. The reigning world champion Boston Red Sox. That's right, Stephen. I'm going to get it in as many times as possible during these discussions. Losses for the Red Sox, they're not huge major stuff, but they did, of course, lose the Beards. They lost Stephen Drew. They've lost Saltalamacchia. They've lost Franklin Morales. And they've lost, to me, probably the key part, which I hope they've let go, is the magic of last year.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that, for the most part, has been brought back. So you're trying to retain a title, which is always very, very difficult. You've got to hope that the guys come out as hungry as they finished last season. Have you still got that amazing clubhouse that you had last season? I mean, it was just absolutely incredible what that team were able to produce on the field, and also how well they got on with each other in the clubhouse. And if they could produce that again, the magic will still be there, but it'll be a different kind of magic for them. But for me, I think they've got some question marks. I'm not completely sold on the left-hand side of their infield with Bogarts and Middlebrooks. Mm-hmm. I think you're going with a couple of really young guys over there. I think it's very, very difficult. I'm not saying it can't work, but I think it's very, very difficult, and they're going to have to hope that the more experienced guys around them are going to be able to help them. Grady Sizemore starting out in centre field. I mean, it's interesting to see. Obviously, you broke the story earlier on today about him getting that job. Is he going to be the everyday centre fielder? Are we still going to be talking about Grady Sizemore towards the end of the season? Is he going to have produced enough? I'm not so sure. I can see pitfalls in this lineup. I'm not saying they're going to drop off the planet. I still think they'll win 90-plus games, but I'm still not solely convinced. I think the one thing they can do, though, for me, where they have got the advantage over the Rays, is their bullpen is better for me. And everyone talked, and even me last season, talked about how good the Cardinals pitching was going to be and how good that bullpen was going to be. And then for me, the Red Sox pitching out, they outpitched them. They outpitched Detroit and they outpitched the Cardinals. So you've got to give them credit for that. But they did it with guys kind of almost pitching out in a very, very peak. Can they raise it again to get back to that peak? And that's always difficult when you're a champion. So for me, I think they'll have a bit of a drop-off, and that's the reason why I've got the Rays taking the division. But the Red Sox and the Rays will still be there, and I would not be surprised if one of those two teams makes it to the World Series from the American League.
No doubt about it. The issue of the bullpen is a legitimate one to raise. Let's not forget the hero of that bullpen and the hero of the World Series in many people's eyes outside of Big Poppy was obviously Koji Uehara, High Five City himself. And, of course, he was playing minor league ball until two of the Red Sox closers went down, and he was a reliever, and he said, let's just stick this guy as the closer for a couple of games. It rolls on from there, and he ends up being a hero of the World Series. Very difficult to repeat that. I believe he's 38 or 39 years old now. So they re-signed Mike Napoli, which I think is an important, good deal for the clubhouse, great clubhouse guy. Everyone raves about him, and just a strong bat, because that lineup, Stephen, isn't particularly great. I said this to you last year many times. It's not that the lineup is good or very solid, but they get clutch hits from guys you don't expect. So Daniel Nava pops up with a stand-up double. So did Mike Carp, David Ross, Johnny Gomes. These guys just came out of nowhere at times. Very difficult to repeat that, but they still have some name recognition with Pedroia and Ortiz, and I like Napoli, like I said. So they also re-signed David Ortiz. Comes with that is the talk of David Ortiz's legacy and the PED questions. That's going to hang around him whenever he's with the Red Sox. They also bring in A.G. Pierzynski. Also, that brings in A.G. Pierzynski's attitude, which he's got no friends in baseball, so it kind of worries me. But I think if they can get through it anywhere, and it's probably going to be with this clubhouse, with the Red Sox. He's not going to come in and be a big I am into this ball club that's just won a World Series. He has no leverage in that regard. And then the main one for me is Grady Sizemore. Like I said on OutsidePitchMLB.com today, he was told it's his opportunity. Now, I find that I use that quote a lot when talking about this story, because I find it a very interesting choice of words from the manager. Like, it's not a set in stone, this is yours. It's more of a, look, we wanted Jackie to take this job, Jackie Bradley Jr. He's done absolutely nothing to claim the job, so it's your chance now to prove you can be not an everyday player. I don't think they expect that from him because of obviously the injury history, but prove to us that when we put you in, you are going to be a legitimate big league starter for us. I think that's all he needs to do. I think watching spring ball, he can do it, but then of course the injury concerns is just too much to take. Like, you can't bank on it.
No, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's. I wonder whether we're going to be talking about Grady Sizemore come August. And I think that's the issue. And this is like part of the pitfalls that I can see in that lineup. I mean, this is a lineup that scored more runs than anyone else in the major leagues last season. You have to wonder, I mean, how on earth they did that, because there just wasn't the bats there to do it. But again, I mean, they performed at such an excellent level. And I think for me, again, it's just something else. You can see the drop off. And I think that's what could potentially happen to them. I mean, there's a few what ifs. They're not like Yankee what ifs, and in ifs and buts, but you can still see them in this lineup. But I think for me, I think if their pitching comes around, I mean, that's for me is that their big key for me is that if the pitching is as solid as it was last season, and the younger guys in Bogus and Middlebrooks really do perform at the projections that people are talking about.
All right, then let's get to their keys for the season. I have many ones. My main one, like I said, is to forget last year and move on. I think having new guys in the clubhouse and some younger guys who weren't key components is probably going to help with that. Plus, I just trust in John Farrell. I think he's going to recognize it's time to approach this new year as a complete different new year with new guys. But also, that fifth starting job is really important because they got John Lester, who I love, contract year. He's going to ball out. John Lackey, can he perform again to last year's standard? I doubt he can do that, but he can probably get somewhere near it at his age. Peavy scares me because he's always injured, and he was pretty inconsistent at the back end of last year. Clay Buchholz, I love Buchholz. Is just as close to an ace as you can get right now. And then Felix DeBron is the fifth one, and that scares all hex out of me. Like, sometimes he turns up, and like he's just scattergun everywhere. Sometimes he turns up, he looks like Verlander in his prime. So that for me is a big issue for them. What are they going to do with the fifth spot in the rotation? And is PV going to be okay?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, for me, I mean, I wasn't necessarily a big fan of the PV signing last season. I thought, he's solid, but not overly spectacular. And I think you're another year on again, and can he even produce a decent pitching performance on a consistent basis? I think you're fine in your pitching overall in the rotation. Saying for me, I think the bullpen is better. So always going to be there or thereabouts with the Rays. I think that's going to be like a back and forth battle over the course of the season in that American League East. And we all know what the banter's like between the people that run their social media accounts on both sides of that fence. That's going to be another intriguing battle for anyone that is on Twitter. Keep an eye on those two accounts, because they're some of the funniest people behind social media that there is in Major League Baseball.
No doubt about it. Okay, predicting the division standings, I have them winning the division. I have them making the ALCS as well. You probably, I guess, have them second, but do you have them snagging a wild card spot?
Yeah, without a doubt. Both these two teams, even though I've got the Red Sox behind the Rays, both these two teams are going to be in the playoffs, and for me, I actually think one of those two teams will be the team that represents the American League in the World Series.
Well, I love it. I love American League talk. I love AL East talk, obviously, and I love the fact that you said one of us, I've got a 50-50 shot then, it's set in stone because Stephen Edwards says it. 50-50 shot, I get to go back to the World Series and have that ride all over again. So I'm looking forward to this season. That'll do us, Stephen, for the American League East edition of this first AUK 2014 MLB season preview. They won't always be this long. AL East has a lot of storylines, a lot of big names, lots of me to discuss with Red Sox and Yankees baseball. Stephen, this has been a good one.
No, it has been a good one. This is the most exciting division in baseball, and that's why we can sit here and talk about it for a very long time, and I hope everyone has enjoyed it.
All right, then make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. The next one out will be the AL Central, and that'll be coming to you soon.